Okay, Wednesday's practice. Thought the defense really practiced well today. A little bit different format after having a day off, unusual, but it was good. I thought they really came out, especially the defensive front, really physical, which is good to see because anytime you go on the road in a conference game, you're going to need that.
You talked about after the Stanford game how a couple spots on the offensive line are going to be more competitive. You're going to look at them harder. What's the latest with that? Has Andre stepped up well?
Yeah, Andre did, as we talked about in the game. Played his best game by far last week, but we opened it up again this week, and we've split the reps right down the middle. Haven't made a decision on the game yet.
Last season, Utah was definitely a running team. John went ran for 1,500 yards. He was one of the conference's leading rushers. This year, they're kind of struggling to find their identity. How does he play into your schemes this week?
Well, I think it sounds like he's going to be healthy. First off, he hasn't been healthy. And they're breaking in some new offensive linemen and losing their 2 tackles, which were really good players, is going to affect anybody. And so I think they're just going through the growing pains of new guys in there and running back not healthy. So I'm sure they'll be ready for us and he'll be healthy.
It seemed like after their last game that Kyle Whittingham was talking about this maybe being some sort of a turning point or crossroads point for them. I'm sure you don't like it when the other team comes off a loss like that, right?
Yeah, sometimes it goes one or two ways. Sometimes teams go in the tank, but sometimes it brings teams closer together when you don't play a game that you're excited about how you did, much like what happened to us, and we had our best week of practice after our loss. So, and I don't think that matters anyway. I think it's the SC factor that we've talked about before. When you go into somebody else's place, it's going to be their biggest game of the year, and they're going to be up for it. And just in the Pac-12 media days, remembering how many Salt Lake radio stations, TV stations were down here, and it was the first thing they said, this is going to be the biggest game in the history of the school.
Is that amplified even more because it's a Thursday night, primetime, national game, all that stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I think that any time that there's no other games going and everybody's going to watch you, becomes more of a statement game for the team that's considered to be the underdog.
Did you watch see any of the West Virginia game, or conscious of what Geno Smith did? As an offensive coordinator, what's kind of your reaction?
Yeah, I kind of saw the numbers as it was going on. I don't know how you do that. It's just amazing. I was talking to Woody and Marquise and said, it's hard to do that on air, versus a service team, where 5 incompletions and those type of numbers. It's really amazing.
With this week kind of like just being out of routine, how do you keep your guys just kind of in check?
Yeah, we've done our best just really to coach extremely hard and really get on them and make sure that they felt our intensity out here, and I think our staff's done a good job of that.
The 3 teams you've beaten haven't had a win against FBS teams. Does that make it harder to evaluate yourself at all?
No. Like I've said before, I think that comparing games and who you play and this team play that, I just don't think that means very much. We shouldn't go play Washington then because we're going to lose because they beat Stanford, we lost to Stanford. So we just don't get into that because every game's different and the SC factor as well for teams.
How do you get Robert going?
Throwing the ball more early, would help. Teams have done a good job of taking him away. Even though his numbers aren't as big as they have been before, teams are still game planning for these 2 receivers. So, hopefully for the passing game, the defense has changed. If not, then the games will go like they did last week.
Has Robert looked off to you at all? Rusty? Anything coming off, that injury that he had or the surgery that he had?
Well, I think, anytime that a guy never really practices a full week, which he doesn't, there's always a day that we have to give him off. And it's usually a Wednesday or a Thursday. It just depends on how he's feeling and what part of the game plan's in that day. That's going to affect you, but it is where it is.
Is the F receiver spot something that's going to become more of a rotation, or does it seem like Nelson?
Well, Nelson has it right now. Hopefully George Farmer will come back and get into that mix. And, but Nelson's doing really well.
They have a nose tackle who a lot of people projecting maybe to be the first pick in the draft next year. What have you seen of him on film, and what challenges does he present for your team?
Well, I think he's really improved. You get caught watching last year to this year. It's a different guy. He was a really good player last year, obviously, but he looks like he's trimmed down, and he's stronger, and he's quicker and better shape, and can take over games if you allow him to.
It seemed like Arizona State had a good game throwing the ball against them last time they played. Were they scheming to stop Arizona State's run game, and that's why, or is it something you feel like you can take advantage
Well, I think Arizona State made some big plays in that game, whether it was making people miss or catching a go route down on the sidelines. The quarterback made some really good throws, and they made some really good plays versus a lot of man-to-man coverage, which we don't see very much of. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that this week.
You don't pay that much attention to the polls, but there's 6 Pac-12 teams, I think, ranked this week. Does that surprise you at all? Or
I didn't know that. No, I think as we've talked about, it's very competitive. You've got some pretty dynamic coaches that have joined in, and I think that's a result of us not just nailing recruiting over the last 5 years. And there's players getting away into this conference, and that's been our goal to stop that. And also, once we get our numbers back to where we're allowed to sign more, I think that'll help as well.
When you're watching film of different opponents, do you see players that on playing for other teams that you think should have got that guy or shouldn't get that guy?
Yeah, you're always trying to evaluate how guys turn out. I'm not going to say the name. There's a guy Saturday making plays that we had right here in our camp, but we didn't take him because we didn't have enough room for him. So that's part of the sanctions.
Is there anything that you do differently or that you can't do in preparation for like a midweek game like this on Thursday night?
No, it's just a little bit different with their schedules. When they have classes, and obviously practicing on Sundays, but there's nothing you can't do.
Is the center in your offense have more responsibility than in other offenses, and kind of what are the chief responsibilities that the center has?
That's a good question. I don't know that he has more. We put a lot on him, but I don't know that that's more than what other people do. He's so valuable. That position's so valuable for anybody, but our guy's so smart and does so many things that you kind of sometimes forget about all the stuff that he does until he wasn't there, and then you really notice it.
When you talked about defense being a good day, how do you evaluate today's offense? What did you see when you saw the offense?
Well, I thought that I thought the quarterback in 9 and 2 really have had 2 great days. If you go back to our last practice and this one, of really trying to set the tempo for everybody around them and really get things back the way they want them. All right, thanks guys.